Right, so I think we're about ready to go. Are you ready, Peggy?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome, lovely job. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy Thursday. You're here with the Digital Culture Network, and today's session we're looking at getting started with email marketing, which is going to be hosted by the lovely Peggy, who I will hand over to in a couple of seconds. Just before we get going, obviously just the usual housekeeping stuff. Obviously, you should be pretty familiar with Zoom now. I'm sure we've all been using the platform quite a lot over the year. This session is going to be recorded, so don't worry about trying to remember absolutely everything, all the lovely pearls of wisdom that Peggy's going to impart today. Please don't worry. We will be sending a recording out shortly after the webinar, which will have all of today's session and the slides as well. So don't worry about that. Obviously, we're seeing loads of people introduce yourself. Please let us know who you are. If you've got any technical questions at all, any issues with sound or anything like that, feel free to pop that in the chat, and I'll do my best to try and help you, just to make sure you can experience the presentation today. And of course, we love questions. We'd love to hear from you. If there's anything specific about the content that we're talking about today, please drop that in the Q&A section. So not the chat section, in the Q&A bit. And we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the session where we'll get to ask Peggy some questions about today's content. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Peggy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. And welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining me today, and Nick. Here's what we're going to talk about in today's session. So we're going to start off by looking at what is email marketing. It sounds like a little bit of an obvious question. It's about using email to do your marketing. Most of us are signed up to some mailing lists. We might receive email marketing from lots of different organizations. And a lot of you have probably sent some emails yourself. On top of this sort of basic idea, we're going to look at why email marketing is still such an important part of your marketing and brand strategy. And to do this, we're going to look at some key emails that you can include in your strategy. And I'm going to talk you through some top tips for email marketing success. At the end of the session, I'm going to spend about 15 minutes going through any questions that have come up. And if you've got any kind of questions that I can't answer today, or you want to ask at a later stage, I'll put them in a follow-up email for you so that we get to all of them. Just a quick note that this is very much a strategic overview. I'm not going to go into the nuts and bolts of how to implement every idea in every system. But if you have got specific system questions, put them in the Q&A and I'll try and answer them. Or we can set up a one-to-one meeting where I can go through those questions with you. So the basics, what is email marketing? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's about using emails to market something about your organization. But today I want to debunk a few myths. So what isn't it? Pushy sales emails, spam, using trickery so people will buy your products. These are not the kinds of emails I'm going to be talking to you about today. One of the sort of simple ways I think you can look at email marketing is that it's about sending the right information to the right people at the right time. So it doesn't need to be about sales, it can be, but it might also be letting people know about your organization, your service, your products, your events. It might be about building a relationship with your audience. It might be about nurturing your audience through different interactions. So things like when they've bought something or before they come to an event. It can also be about event bookings, online shop purchases, charitable donations and memberships. So those more kind of core sales parts of your business. So by sending information to people who are going to find it interesting at the right time in their relationship with you, email marketing can really become a valuable tool in building a relationship with your audience. So why is it so important? Sometimes I feel a bit like Hayden, our social media specialist, kind of uncle auntie. Emails it's been around for such a long time, and it's not quite as exciting as all the kind of social media things that are coming out and all the new kind of technologies and all of that kind of excitement around those things. But there is a reason why it's been around for so long. It's not more important than your other channels, but it is worth considering its strengths when you're planning how to use different channels in your email marketing strategy. So it's really great for customer or audience retention. It's much easier to retain an existing customer or an existing audience member than it is to find and attract a brand new audience. It's also great for conversions. So by that, I mean when someone carries out an action you want them to. Sales conversions, like buying a ticket or buying something in your shop and making donations. This leads well onto return on investment. So research shows that for every £1 you spend on email marketing, you can get a return on investment of about £38 to £42. So you can look at Litmus for more information about how to calculate return on investment if you're interested in getting into that real kind of numbers game there. You can also learn a lot about your audience through email marketing. So you can tailor your approach based on what you learn. You can use this to then inform your other marketing channels. So you can inform your social media and your kind of website strategy and things like that. That's why some organizations adopt what's called an email first marketing strategy. So hopefully that information's given you loads of enthusiasm to get started with email marketing. And I'm going to talk you through the things you need to actually get started with sending your first email. So when it's at its very basic, you just need 3 things to send marketing emails. You need a sending platform, an audience, and some content. As you get more into emails and more advanced, you can find tools like email testing software, content planners and designers, but you don't actually need anything really very fancy when you're first getting started. So a sending platform. There are loads of email sending platforms out there. You might have heard of MailChimp because it's quite a well-used one in the arts world. There's other popular platforms like Campaign Monitor, Digital, Wordfly, GetResponse. If you don't already have a platform set up or you're thinking of switching to a new provider, I'm going to share a resource at the end of this, which has got a list of some of the popular platforms and different functions. When you come to choose a platform, you need to think about your budget. So all of the different platforms use slightly different calculations. It might be based on a number of people in your mailing list. It might be about how many emails you plan to send per month. Most of them have got free trials. You can try out some of the functionality. Some of them have a basic version that's always free, depending on how many people are on your list. You might want to look at integrations. So you can integrate your box office, your online shop, your website with your email sending provider. The benefit of doing this is that most organizations collect a lot of their email signups when people are already making, they're in a transaction with you. So it might be when they're buying something rather than through a kind of standalone mailing list sign up. If your platforms don't integrate with each other, or you just kind of don't want to get into the technicalities of that, you can also do this manually. So collect a sign up through your box office purchase path and then add it manually into your email sending platform. It just takes a little bit more work. Finally, you'll need to look at functionality. So you'll probably find that this is quite similar across all the platforms that are within your budget, but just check it before you buy if you have very specific needs. In the resource I mentioned earlier, I've got some of the key functions so you can compare them across the different platforms. So things like how easy is it to design emails? Do they have ready-built templates? How can you segment your audience? Sign up forms and automations. I'm going to try desperately not to use acronyms, but you might hear me referring to an ESP through this session. It just means email service provider, and that is your MailChimp, Campaign Monitor, etc. Next, you need an audience. So the audience can be as simple as complex as you like, but the one rule is that it must be GDPR compliant. So that means all the people on your mailing list must have opted in to receive marketing from you. The easiest way to make sure your list is compliant is to set up a dedicated form to collect your signups. Most sending platforms will have a template for you, so you don't have to build this from scratch. You can also, like I mentioned, use your other channels. So add a sign up to any purchase path. So from your shop, your box office. This is the route you'll probably collect the most for signups from if you set it up. You can also collect signups offline. It's a little bit less relevant now because we're not doing any events, but it can be a good option if you attend networking events or fairs. So some email platforms allow you to create a form for an iPad, and it can collect even if you've not got Wi-Fi, and then you'll just sync it later on. You can also do it with a pen and paper if you want to, but you just have to be very careful with GDPR compliance, you know, not leaving a clipboard of data hanging around for anyone to find. And then you'll have the work of entering it into your system at a later stage. In terms of data to collect, email address is kind of the only thing you actually need. Some email experts say just collect email address because you want to make it as easy as possible for people to sign up, and anything else you can collect at a later date. But there is some other information it might be useful to collect. First name or given name. By adding a first name into your subject line or into your email copy, that can really boost engagement, so more people opening and clicking. It's just nice to be addressed by name. Email preferences. So if you send a lot of emails and you have distinct groups of people in your audience, it can be useful to collect a bit of information about what do they want to hear about. So the more targeted and relevant your emails are to the people within your audience, the more likely they are to open them. So I've got a resource all about planning and segmenting your audience, and that's available on our website. It could also be useful to collect region or location. This is mainly for people who are kind of traveling or national companies. So you can then target people geographically. So just to give you an example, someone living in Cornwall probably isn't going to be so interested in an event that you're putting on in Newcastle. Next, the content. This is the final thing in my triple. I think this is the thing that puts people off sending emails the most, just because it seems like such a big job to put together all the content, images and copy for a regular newsletter. But it doesn't have to be a really big slog. Firstly, your emails don't need to be long. In fact, if you only include one story instead of kind of 5 or 6, your engagement is actually likely to be higher than with that shorter email. Also, your content doesn't need to be brand new. So if you've created some amazing videos or you've got a great blog that you run, you can share this in your new newsletter to make sure that your subscribers see that work that you're doing. Okay, so now you know the basics that you need to get started with email marketing. I'm going to talk you through 3 key emails to include in your email strategy. I'm going to start with a newsletter because it's an email we're all really familiar with. So you might have sent one, you probably received some newsletters in your inbox. There are lots of different ways to create a newsletter, and I'm going to focus on 2 sort of types, which is a roundup, a news roundup, and a single news story. The roundup is kind of favoured by a lot of organisations. It normally contains several stories in sort of summary form. So as a reader, you have the option to scan down and then click through to read the full story of anything that you're interested in. So this means this sort of email is good for driving traffic to your website. So it's a great way to signpost people to content you've already created, so like videos or blog posts. You also don't need to know too much about your audience. Because you're including a selection of stories, people can just choose to click through on the ones that interest them. It also works really well for people who need to stick to a strict sending schedule. So if you say, I send an email every month, this means you can collect ideas throughout the month. And then when it comes to the send date, you can choose the best stories to put in. If you're working with people across your organisation who all like to contribute, or you're part of a consortium, this can also be really useful. In terms of cons of this email, having multiple links in an email can actually lead to lower clicks overall. So it's that paradox of choice. So you give a reader too much choice and their decision is actually inaction and they don't click on anything. The other thing is, if you're driven by a schedule over content, you might find that you're sending an email when you don't actually have much interesting stuff to say, or you find suddenly you've got 15 stories to include in your newsletter and you could have sent one 2 weeks ago. So neither of those are ideal from kind of reader's perspective. Finally, these emails tend not to be very targeted. So some readers might start to switch off a little bit if they start to think the content isn't relevant to them. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got a single news story email. So a lot of people are put off sending this kind of email because they feel like they don't want to email their audience more than once a month. But I'd really recommend trying it out. Even if you send a monthly newsletter to everyone on your mailing list, try sending out a single news story to a smaller section of your mailing list to see what the response is like. So these emails are perfect if you've got a particular action you want people to take. So as mentioned earlier, giving people too much choice can paralyze them a little bit. So if you give them one story, one call to action, and then they know exactly what to do, and that means that the engagement tends to be higher on these kinds of emails. This is a lovely example from Foreign Affairs, where the call to action button, which is here, is the only thing you can click on. It opens a new window to respond because that's what they want you to do. They want to hear from you. Another benefit of these kinds of emails is that you can be a bit more responsive. So you can send a story when it's still breaking, instead of waiting for another 2 stories to arrive so that you've got enough content to send out. It's also much easier to send this email to a tailored audience. So an event announcement could go to people who are interested in that type of event. A link to new online family content could be sent only to people with children and things like that. In terms of cons of this kind of email, I'll add some in, even though these are kind of my favorite emails to send. So for organizations where you have loads of news, you might not have the capacity to send a single email news story for every single piece of news you've got. So a roundup might just be really necessary for you to get that information out. Also, if you don't know your audience very well and you send a very specific email, you might find that it's totally irrelevant to them. Whereas with the kind of news roundup, there will hopefully be at least one story that will pique their interest. The great news is that you don't have to stick to one kind of newsletter. So you might find that the roundup works really well for you in general, and you get into a really good rhythm of sending one, perhaps monthly. But then suddenly you have a really great piece of news that you just have to share, or an action that you really want people to take. And in that situation, it's okay to divert from that monthly sending pattern that you have. If you do send a single news story to supplement your main kind of digest newsletter, consider sending it to a smaller targeted group of people and just see what the response is like to it. I'm just going to pop this up here. This is a website called Really Good Emails. If you need some inspiration for your newsletter, I'd really recommend looking here. You can filter by different organization types. So this is arts and crafts, or you can look at email types. So things like a newsletter, a welcome email, and so on. And there's just loads of examples that you can learn from. Another one that's industry specific is Museum of Modern Email. This showcases emails from arts and cultural organisations. It's run by Wordfly. Again, you can take a look by email type, and they've also got a special collection at the moment, which is all about arts at home. So it's well worth looking at. As well as these 2 places, sign up to some newsletters from organisations you admire. And when you receive them, think about, what do you like receiving as an email reader? What makes you take action? What made you click on that email or open that email? And at the other end of it, what makes you delete those emails and unsubscribe from them? So do a bit of research yourself. The next email I'm going to talk about is the welcome email. And this is one of the must-haves in my email strategy. So what is a welcome email? It's an email that you send out to anyone who subscribes to your mailing list. So this is a really nice, simple example from Pound Arts. It just lets you know what kind of emails you're going to receive, and it says, thank you for signing up. It can also contain quite a lot of information. So this is a really nice example from Spike Island, which gives you some key information that a new subscriber might like to know. Who are Spike Island? What's on at the gallery? And how can you support them? So why is a welcome email so important? Firstly, it's all about engagement. People who have just signed up to your mailing list are some of the most engaged contacts that you have, and the welcome email really capitalizes on that. More people open and click through from welcome emails than any other kind of marketing email. So some organizations, that engagement is about double of that of a standard newsletter. It makes it a really great time to give key information and actions that you think a new subscriber might like to know or need to know. It also means people won't have to wait too long to receive their first email. If someone has to wait a month for your first newsletter, they might forget they even signed up, or even why they signed up. So sending an email soon after they've signed up just shows that you care about the relationship with your audience. My favourite reason for doing a welcome email, though, is this. It avoids awkward first emails. So I sign up to a lot of newsletters. It's all in the name of research. And I just want to tell you about a couple of awkward experiences I've had recently. I am not going to name and shame. But I signed up to a newsletter and I received my first email 6 weeks later. It was an error thanking me for a purchase I hadn't made. I got a really quick apology, but I haven't actually received any other kind of contact from them other than that mistake email. The second one is I signed up to a newsletter and I received my first email after 2 months. And this one, it was a request for a donation. Again, I've not received any kind of communication from them since then. So in both of these situations, there are lots of other things that led me to have a bad experience. So poor segmentation of mailing list, box office errors. But at least if I'd had that welcome email to begin with, I would have had some kind of relationship with the organisation before it happened. So what should go into a welcome email? So I showed you those 2 examples at the beginning. The welcome email is just really about your audience experience, and it can be quite different depending on what you need your audience to know. Consider including these things though: a thank you. People have shown you a commitment and it deserves just a quick thank you for signing up. An introduction. Who are you? What does a new subscriber need to know about you? It could be your opening hours. It could be how to book a class. At the moment, it's likely to be about how to access your online offering. And if you set up a welcome email with that information in, people are going to start looking at your online content even more. The benefits of signing up. So remind the readers about what the benefits of signing up to your newsletter are. So perhaps you're sending exclusive content over email. You may be sending discounts or priority booking links. Maybe there's access to a resource. So these benefits are a really key part of why people sign up to your newsletter. Remind them in the welcome email, but also use them a step earlier when people are deciding whether to sign up or not, and use them as a way to kind of encourage people to sign up to your mailing list in the first place. Another thing to include is how to update their preferences or unsubscribe. It's really important to make this clear to people because if they don't want to hear from you anymore, what you want them to do is unsubscribe rather than to mark you as spam. So make that really nice and easy for them to do. And finally, your welcome email should have a call to action, and try to limit it to just one call to action. Think about what the most valuable thing that someone could do when they read your welcome email is. So if your welcome email is a 10% off in your online shop, you want to send a link that's to the shop with that 10% voucher attached. Otherwise, it might be anything you think is important as part of your wider strategy. It might be about watching a video, introducing yourselves. It might be about following you on social media, or it might be downloading the resource you tempted them with. So whichever thing makes the most sense for your audience. What if you have loads of calls to action that you want people to do when they first join you? If you feel like new subscribers need to learn lots of different things, you could consider a welcome series. This is really useful for kind of membership organisations where you might need to let them know about how their membership works, places they can use a discount, or classes they can come to. Receiving all of that in one go can be a bit overwhelming, so it can be really useful to break it down into a few emails. I've not seen an example of a welcome series in the arts sector. If you've seen one, let me know. But this is one I really like from Riverford, who are a veg box delivery scheme. I got 5 emails over the course of 5 weeks, and I'm just going to pop 3 of them up. So this one is the real kind of nuts and bolts. How do you order? How do you change your order? What happens if you go on holiday? And it's the stuff you really, really need to know. The next one tells me all about their ethical credentials. So it's reminding me why I chose to shop with them in the first place. The information isn't essential anymore, not like the information in the basics, but it's really important for kind of building that relationship. This one's the final email I got, which is asking for feedback and suggesting I refer a friend. So notice that they didn't do that in the first email. They waited 5 weeks, by which point I'd had like 5 veg boxes, I'd had these 5 emails. So they've really started to build up a relationship before they asked me to do something like refer a friend. You might hear about this being called a drip campaign, and it's a great way to build a relationship with your subscribers. So how do welcome emails work? They're an automation, which makes it sound really fancy, but most email providers will have a template that you can use. And it's brilliant because it means you don't have to send a manual email every time someone signs up to your mailing list. First, you need to design your email, so the same way as you'd design any other email you want to send out. And then you have to set a trigger. So an automation depends on a trigger, and in this case, every time someone signs up to the mailing list, that's the trigger that sets it in motion. But your email service provider should have that predefined for you. You've got the option to set a delay. So normally I'd say probably just send it straight away, but it might be useful if it's part of another process, people signing up as part of another process. So if someone's booking a ticket, they might get quite a few automated emails like a receipt or e-tickets or logins to their account. So a welcome email might get a little bit lost. So in situations like that, you can send it a little bit later, a few hours later, so that it doesn't get lost in the noise. And then finally, you just need to check your content regularly. So in the example of the gallery that talk about their current exhibition, they need to check that content every time the show changes. If you've got opening hours, you'd need to update those if they changed. During lockdown, your welcome email might talk about the fact that you're closed, and once things start to reopen again, you'd want to update it to let people know that you're back open again. So just make a note to check back regularly. So as mentioned, email service providers normally have a template for welcome emails. So it's a really great way to get started with automations. Once you get the hang of it, you might like to try out some other automations. They're a great way to save you time and make connections with your audience at key moments. Here are some ideas for automations you might do. A thank you for your donation, probably best for small one-off donations rather than big donations, which would need a more personalized approach. Thank you for your purchase. Thank you for booking your ticket. There's a link between all these, which is going to lead me to my the final email that I think you should all include in your strategy, which is a thank you email. We all like to be thanked when we do something for someone else. So people in your audience are probably doing lots of things that help you keep going as an organization. So I invite you to have a think about, what are you thankful for? There are some things you might not even think are worthy of a thank you, but just have a think about it. It might be donations, both big and small. Even £1 added as a kind of top up to a ticket purchase is really valuable. Any purchases people make or bookings, times they share things on social media for you, or positive reviews. So each time someone carries out an action like this, they're showing a commitment to you and your organisation, and they probably appreciate a thank you. Not all of these obviously need an email. Sending someone an email to say thanks for retweeting you might be a bit overkill, but it's just useful to kind of list out all those ways people are supporting you. And then have a think about, why are you thankful? So what does this action allow you to do? It might be that your donation goes towards the running of a youth programme, or maybe the proceeds from your shop help you to build and protect and maintain your building. Maybe ticket sales enable you to carry out some experimental programming. So just have a think about why that kind of really helps you as an organisation, how it helps you fulfil your goals. I've got two nice examples. So this is one from Pound Arts, where they say, your donation will help us fight back once coronavirus pandemic has passed. So it's really timely, it's about now. And then here's one from Arnold Feeney, and it tells you about how it will make a difference to them being able to reach audiences who don't normally engage in their programme. So really nice specific reasons why that donation has helped. So why send one? People just like to be recognised for what they do, and thanking is a simple way to show that you value people. And the other thing is that when people feel good about something that they've done, it encourages them to take that action again in the future. And in particular, if you share information about how their actions have helped you achieve your charitable aims or your organisational objectives, it can be a really good driver to encourage people to do that again. So here's a couple of things to consider when you're sending a thank you. Your thank you email could be automated or manual. If you want to automate the process, you'll need to look at integrating your email system with your donation system with your shop, or check to see if your other systems can send out automated emails. Some of them will send an automated email to say thank you for a donation or thank you for your purchase, and you'll just need to go in and make changes to that template. The next thing is to make a list of all the things you could possibly thank people for, and then choose which channel is the most appropriate for each scenario. Once you've got a list that are suitable for emails, pick one and focus on it as a starting point. So make sure you're making this manageable. And then finally, I'd like to ask you about whether you're tracking people who make multiple donations to your organisation, maybe small ones, or maybe they're regularly buying things from your shop. You might want to start looking into tracking that, because you could then consider that sending them an extra special thank you for being so loyal. I'm going to be running another webinar with Nick next year, and we're going to talk all about spotting those opportunities to communicate with people. So book onto that if you're interested in hearing more about those kinds of opportunities. Great. So now that I've talked you through my top emails to include in your strategy, I'm going to do a quick rundown of some top tips that will be useful for you anytime you're planning an email, whether that's a newsletter, a welcome email, a thank you email, or any other kind of email you want to send. So first of all, these are all planning top tips. First of all, set an objective. This is really key, because when you compare your results to your objectives, you can really start to understand if your email marketing is working in the way you want it to. As I mentioned right at the start, it doesn't have to be about sales. It might be things like, when the reader receives this email, I want them to watch this video, click through to read a blog, buy a ticket for this event, share some information on Facebook. James has got a really brilliant webinar all about tracking campaign performance, and you can watch that for more tips on setting objectives. Second one is to segment. So once you've thought about your objective and what you're going to ask people to do in your email, have a think about whether your whole audience need to receive that email. Who's going to be the most likely to carry out that action? Who in the audience is going to be the most likely to derive some value from that email? So if you've got a really small mailing list, or your events or offer is already quite tailored for a particular group, this might not apply to you, but those of you with bigger mailing lists, this is a really, really useful thing to do. So frequency. This is one of the questions I get asked the most, and it was a lot of you on your booking forms asked about how often you should be emailing. So lots of people start monthly with their emails, which is fine as a kind of starting point. But have a think about as well, how much do you have to say? Each audience is different, and each organisation is different. Some people send emails daily. I think it's unlikely any of you are going to be doing that. And some people only send annually. The best thing to do is to try it out. So test out some different frequencies on your audience and see what seems to kind of help people engage more. Just a couple of things to think about though. If you don't send emails very often, so if you send kind of less than monthly, you might find that they aren't coming through to people's inboxes, just because having a kind of a regular send gives you a better reputation as an email sender. And the other thing is, people might, it sounds ridiculous, but people might forget who you are. So if you leave a kind of 3-month gap between emails and then you suddenly pop up in people's inboxes again, they might be a bit like, oh, I don't remember signing up to this mailing list. The next top tips are all about calls to action. So your call to action is going to link directly back to the objective that you set for an email. If you write your call to action first, it will help you to guide the rest of the content that you want to include. So if your main action you want people to take is to watch a video, your call to action is going to be watch our video on YouTube. If you want people to book a ticket, it might be book now for, or save my space for this event. Make sure your call to action is active, and make sure it's unique. Don't just say kind of click here or read more. The other thing you need to do with your call to action is to make it stand out. So if you display it as if it was a button, it will draw people's attention. So you'll see here I've used a standout colour and added plenty of white space around the call to action as well. Most email providers will have an option for adding in buttons, and you can just edit the text and the link you want to go through on. So the next thing is to make it specific. So this is an email from the Leech Pottery, and it's really specific. I know that when I click on that button, it's going to take me to information about this particular artist, not just a general Leech Pottery webpage. You can also play with point of view. So this is one from University of Cambridge Museums. Tell me what XRF is could just as easily have been find out more about XRF. But try adding in that kind of first person call to action and see if it works with your audience. So it might be things like save my space, start my trial, give me my discount. Just see if that works with your audience. And finally, you could try a visual call to action. So if we look at this one from Broadway Cinema, you'll see that you don't need to be told that clicking on the image is going to show you a trailer. There's the big red play button, and we all kind of know what that means. So have a think about using a visual call to action instead. The next top tips are all about content and design. So firstly, think about hierarchy. If you're using a digest email and you've got lots of different stories and calls to action in your email, think about which is the most important. So this is the Digital Culture Network newsletter, and if you receive that newsletter, you know that we have lots of different stories, lots of news, resources, and links to events. In this issue, we wanted to make sure people looked at our brand new website. So we put that story right at the top, and we gave the call to action a pink button so people really knew what to click on. Further down in the email, we linked out to some events which had been open for booking for a while. So we still wanted people to book on them and to know that they were happening, but it wasn't as important as people looking at our website. So they were further down the email, and they just had plain links for their call to action. The other thing people ask me is, how much should I write in an email? And my answer for this is, write as little as possible, or write just enough. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should just write one sentence and then you're done. It means think about that objective that you set, and think about how much information is that reader going to need to know to encourage them to carry out the action you want them to take. So it might be a sentence or 2 sentences, but it might be a few paragraphs. If you're expecting a big investment from the reader, so if you're wanting them to buy something or donate, you might need to include more trust signals. Think about your email within the context of a wider campaign. So perhaps you might create a drip campaign that leads to the call to action, or you might guide people to the website from your email. And on the website, there's a bit more information about what you want them to carry out. And then you give them the buy or donate call to action on your website instead. I really like this example from Spike Island again. It gives me all the information I need to feel safe visiting them. So this was sent during the period when organisations were opening up again. It tells you, what is the exhibition about? Will I be safe when I come? What are they doing to keep me safe? And is the cafe open? So it's really those kinds of things you just need to know to kind of happily have a visit at their organisation. I just wanted to include this as a completely different example. There's no way that you can actually read what's in this email, but I just wanted to show you that writing a really long email is also okay. And there's just no hard and fast rules about the length of your email. It's all about what's your objective and who is your audience. This email works really well as a long email because it's targeted at people who work in the digital and cultural world. It's a roundup of what's going on in that sphere. So it's pretty niche. And if you're interested, you're interested. Even though you can't probably read the copy on your screens, you'll notice that there are like clear headings and lots of white space around the different links and information in there. So if you're planning to do a very long email, I'd recommend you do something like this. So know your audience and then use those clear headings and kind of break it up a little bit so it's not too overwhelming on the eye. Finally, on this design front, look at your email in different inboxes. So your email is going to look different depending whether people look at it in Outlook, Hotmail, Gmail, or any other provider. It's also going to look different depending on whether they're on mobile or desktop. There is software like Email on Acid and Litmus, and these provide previews in all the different possible combinations of inboxes, so you can have a look at what it would look like. Some email service providers also have that, normally not on the free plan, but on a paid for plan. But you can do it manually, so you don't need to pay anything extra for this. You just need to set up a few free email accounts and then send some tests to the different email accounts. I put this example up because I think it's quite funny. So here's an emoji that you would be sending out, maybe looking at that Apple version, not realizing that someone reading on a Samsung would see a completely different version of it. Next thing we're going to talk about is accessibility. So accessibility in emails is really important. When you first start doing them, it can seem like a lot to think about, but once you get started to include this in your emails, it will just start to come as second nature. And the good news about improving accessibility is this actually makes your emails much better for everyone. So these are things that are really easy to change. One is to have good contrast between your background and your text. So you can see here that one's really easy to read and one's quite difficult to read. There's a tool, there are contrast checkers all over the internet, but one I use is WebAIM, and it will just tell you whether there's enough contrast between your type and your background. The other one is to make your text nice and big, so at least 14, just makes it easier for everyone to read, and especially on mobile as well. The next thing is to write alt text. So some people use screen readers when they're using computers or phones, and these read out everything on the screen, so all the text that's on the screen and some of the HTML as well. If images are forming an integral part of your emails, you should be adding alt text so people can still understand what your email is about. This is really important if you add text into images as well. So this image here, people using screen readers cannot see this text because it's a flattened image, so that text isn't showing up. If you're doing that in your emails, just make sure that you add that text into your alt text. There's a couple of resources I will share with you after this, so how to write good alt text in emails and how to write good alt text in general, because you should be doing this on your website as well. Again, another really easy one, you don't need to read all this text, it's just a visual, but it's much easier to read large bodies of text if they're left aligned. So if you're centering, justifying or right aligning your text, that's going to be harder for people to read. And now I'm going to talk about engagement. This is all about how many people open and click through on your emails. So you need to consider your inbox appeal. This is a screenshot of my Outlook and my Gmail promotions tab. And here are just a few things to consider with your inbox appeal. So the first thing is your sender name. You want to make it friendly. So no kind of do not reply. Just your organization name is fine. It doesn't need to be anything very fancy. You could also try out adding a personal sender name. So here we've got Lauren K at Litmus. If you decide to do this, make sure you include your organization name as well. So if you just kind of, this just said Lauren, this is an email from Lauren, I might be kind of tricked into thinking that was a friend of mine or a personal contact I had, rather than it being a marketing email. And that's actually quite confusing, and it can lower the trust that people have with you. So just make sure you're quite open about where it's being sent from. The next thing to think about is your subject line, which is a bit like the title of your email. So you need to make it specific to the email you want to send. What's inside the email? Try to avoid those generic subject lines like, here's our latest update, or here's our newsletter. Keep it brief. So most inboxes let you see about 50 characters. You'll see that a few of the emails here have kind of come off the end of that character limit. If your subject line is longer than 50 characters, it doesn't matter too much. Just make sure that you front load the key information. The next thing I've kind of touched on it is with the sender name is to be honest. If the subject line is kind of clickbait and then the email is completely different to what you've made people expect through your subject line, you're going to lose the trust of your audience. And just try out different things and see what works for your audience. So you'll see the one that the arrow is pointing at the moment, it's got an emoji in. You could try that. You could try asking a question, or you could just have plain kind of statements of what's inside the email. All of those are perfectly legitimate options for your subject line. There's not kind of hard and fast rules about it. The pre-header text is one of the really important things. It's pre-header or preview text. It appears just under the subject line in most inboxes. You can see I've got the arrows to those there. Your email service provider will probably have a box where you can easily enter this. And please use it. You can use it to elaborate on what you've said in the subject line. You can, if you've asked a question in your subject line, you could answer it. The reason I say to use it is it's another key place to encourage people to open your email. And if you don't use it, most inboxes will just pick up the first thing in your email. So it's quite often something like view this in your browser or an image name. And those don't really do anything to entice the reader in. Using a pre-header makes your email look much more professional and trustworthy. And then you need to review. You should be reviewing every send that you make. It's one of those things that can be really easily forgotten about. But if you review your sends, or if you don't review every send, you might just be sending unloved content month after month. And by reviewing it, you can see what's working, what's not, make improvements, and kind of build that engagement with your email marketing. Start off by looking at the objective you set. Did people click on the links you wanted them to? Did you reach your open rate objective? Did you drive more traffic to your website? What's really worked? And then start to look at the general trend. Did more people open than normal or a similar amount? Did people click through? Did people unsubscribe? You can set up a really simple tracker to help with this that just shows over time what's the engagement like. I've got a simple one that you can use as a starting point that I can share with you. And the final one from me is a little bonus one. This one almost doesn't fit into an introduction to email marketing, but I think it's a really useful one to know about. So if you review your emails after each send, like I said in the last slide, it can really help you then to plan for the next one. But with A/B testing, you're doing that kind of review within one email send. So for example, you might come up with 2 subject lines that you really like, and you're not sure which one's going to work the best. If you do an A/B test, it will let you know which one's working the best. So the principle is, with that kind of subject line example, you would send the version A and version B to a random sample of your audience. You'd wait a period of time to see which one works. And then after that period of time, you send the winner to the most successful version. You can A/B test on loads of elements of your email. You can test out what sender name works, what subject line, preview text, copy to see if copy changes click-through rate, images, call to action. You might test out different colors on your buttons. You can only test one of these things at a time, but it's a really interesting way to start to build an idea of what works for your audience. You can get in touch with me if you'd like to know more about A/B testing. Also, I'm going to be running a webinar in the new year with James and Roberta. That's going to be in February, and we're going to go into a lot more detail about A/B testing, both for emails and for your website. So that's everything from me talking, which is great because I've nearly drunk a whole glass of water now. And I'd love to hear any questions that came in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Peggy. Yes, stay hydrated, I think, is an important message for the day. Well, that was absolutely fantastic. Obviously, jam-packed full of information, tips, resources. I just want to kind of reiterate what Peggy said at the beginning. We're going to be sending out all of this information afterwards. So you'll get an email with a recording of the webinar, the slides, and Peggy will link off to any of those lovely resources she mentioned throughout that. So please don't panic about trying to remember absolutely everything that she said there. So we're going to move on to a quick Q&A for the last 10 minutes. We've got a few questions in, but if you do have a question for Peggy on this topic now that's just sprung to mind, please pop that into the Q&A and we'll get around to them. So I'm going to move on now. So we've got a question from Laura. Is there any way of sending a MailChimp automated email when someone makes a purchase through Shopify? I always get those two confused. So I guess that's sort of translated to, so if you've got a ticketing system, donation system, how easy is that for them to hook up?
Yeah, so most of the platforms will integrate with various systems. So you can set up those kind of post-purchase automated emails. That specific example of Shopify and MailChimp, they used to directly integrate, but they no longer do. And you can use a kind of bridging piece of software called ShopSync. It's not as straightforward as it used to be, but it can be done. So yeah, if you can find help information on both Shopify and MailChimp's websites, I think, or you can get in touch with me and I can send you out those links with that information.
Perfect. Thank you very much. On to the next one. So Linda sent this question in, and I think we did have this question in on the registration as well. So can you send out invitations to join your newsletter to email addresses you already have if you definitely haven't got permission from them? Where do we sort of sit on the GDPR front on that?
The basic answer is you can't email someone to ask them to opt into your emails. There's a kind of, and that's when I'm talking about kind of a bulk email send. So you wouldn't be able to use kind of MailChimp to upload a list of people whose email addresses you have. What you can do is have like different things. So if you are in a conversation with someone over email, so like directly in conversation with someone, you could mention your mailing list to them and ask them to sign up, but it would have to be kind of part of another sort of conversation you're having. There are other ways to kind of encourage people to sign up. So, having it really clear on your website and showing people that that's an option, giving them some reasons to sign up, promoting it on your social media and all those things like that. But no, kind of sending a batch email to ask people to opt in is not really allowed.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately.
Exactly. So one's coming from Becca. Do you have any top tips for MailChimp specifically? And that might not be something that we'll go over in this, but what if people ask you that sort of question, what do you say?
Yeah, MailChimp is top tips. It depends what you're kind of asking in MailChimp. One of my top tips for MailChimp is to really think about your audience to begin with, and to make sure you've got that nice and tidy. So it would be to have, in general, one audience, and then using lists or groups, they're called actually now, groups and tags to organize your mailing list so you can segment it. I see quite a lot of organizations who set up multiple audiences in MailChimp to segment, and that just means if there's any crossover between those audiences, you're going to get charged twice for anyone who's in multiple lists. So my top tip is probably to get your audience sorted out in MailChimp. And then other things within MailChimp is to just kind of use the resources they have. There's loads of resources and top tips on their website. So check those out, and check out the templates as well, because they've got some great templates that you can use.
Awesome, that's great. Hopefully that's answered some of your points there, Becca. On to the next one. This one's from Sophie. Can we segment people into preferences after they've signed up through the website? What's your sort of tips around that?
Yeah, so you can. You probably wouldn't want to segment them without kind of asking them, because you need some information to be able to create any kind of segment. But you can do that after you've got them to sign up. So if you've got a sign up form that just collects an email address, you can use that welcome email to ask people to update their preferences. So that might be your call to action. You might say, hey, really thanks for signing up. Here's a little bit of information about our organisation. These are the kinds of emails we send. Tell us what you want to hear about. And then when they click through on that, it would take them through to a preference form where they could say, I'm interested in hearing about family events or late night events or whatever your options happen to be. And you can always have that profile page live. So any email you send can have that preference link, and people can click on it and always update what their preferences are.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're asking for all that information up front, that could be a bit of a barrier, or I might just tick it quickly because I'm just in a rush. But I suppose it's allowed giving people that space to give you appropriate answers.
Exactly, and there's pros and cons to both. And the thing about not collecting that at the sign up form is that there is going to be some drop off in whether people click on it or not. So those people who don't click through to update their preferences, you'll have to send a generic email to those people because you just don't know that. There are other ways to collect information about people though. So if you are integrated with another system, you might use information, things like, have they attended an event in the past, or have they made a purchase in the past, what kinds of other interactions have they had with us, where did we meet them, all of that kind of stuff. So you can use that to segment your audience as well as the stuff they directly tell you.
Great, that's fantastic. A question from Sophie. So she finds some of the template layouts in MailChimp a little bit rigid. So if, say, you do have an email send provider that you maybe don't like the templates, or it's a little bit sort of boxy, is there a way around for someone to be able to design something for you, and then can they be inserted into those sort of providers? Is that possible?
It does vary across providers, and sometimes the best way to create the most kind of the template that really meets what you want it to do is to use the HTML, and you can get a designer to put together that HTML code for you and then put it into a system. The drawback to doing that is depending on the system, once you've created an HTML version of it, you then have to do all of your editing in the HTML. It depends on the provider though. Some of them you can create HTML and then use what's called a WYSIWYG editor. So that's kind of like,
sounds fun.
Yeah, WYSIWYG is just what you see is what you get. So in an editor like that, you would be able to kind of type straight into what the email looks like and, you know, switch out pictures. But you would just have to check that based on provider. In MailChimp, I'm not sure if you can switch between HTML and template-based emails very easily. Having said that, if you've got a little bit of a mind for it, once you've got an email template, it is quite straightforward to find which bits you need to update in the HTML code, because if it's copy, you'll be able to see the copy that you want to change, and you just need to kind of put your cursor in there and make changes. But I appreciate HTML is not everyone's idea of fun, so you might like to stick to the simplicity of just the WYSIWYG.
Awesome, that's great. Hopefully that's answered that question for you, Sophie. We're going to go for one more question before we get off. Sorry that we've not been around to getting everyone loads of really great questions that's coming in. Jessica says, hello, is there a way to make sure the view in browser doesn't appear in the preview header? So is that just about making that preview text longer, or what would you suggest on that? Or is it just that they haven't filled it in?
If view in browser is the first thing you see in the pre-header, yeah, that just means you've not used it. You're right though, sometimes if you've got like a shorter piece of pre-header text, it will then pick up the next part of your email. There are things you can do. I can't remember exactly. There's a piece of like code you can put in that creates a blank space after your pre-header. Obviously, some people don't want to get into the coding of things. So another thing would be to write just longer pre-header text. Or move the view in browser link a little bit as well in your email. With writing longer pre-header text, I quite like this tactic that some people use, which is that they'll write kind of like a sentence of pre-header text like you would normally do, and then they just kind of write it again but in a slightly different way, and then they write it again and again, and the pre-header text like goes over multiple lines, and it just means that no matter how far you stretch out that inbox preview, you always just see something that's kind of like a fun piece of content.
Great. Hopefully that's given a bit more information there, Jessica. I'm just going to ask one more. I'm so sorry. It's because I missed them on the chat. So poor Victor has been waiting a little while to answer this question. So I just want to make sure that I do answer that for him. So so Victor's put, I use WooCommerce on my site. How easy is that to link to MailChimp or other email marketing tools? Have you seen people doing that with?
I've not worked with anyone who's doing that. From what I remember, WooCommerce and MailChimp do connect to each other.
Yeah.
I'll send out, like I mentioned in that email, there'll be a resource, and each of the marketing platforms that I mention, I've got a link out to what their integrations are. So you'll be able to find that link really easily, Victor. Just find the MailChimp one, click out and have a look. Is WooCommerce in the list? Honestly, MailChimp have got like 350 or so integrations. So unless you're using something really niche, hopefully it'll be in there.
Perfect. Lovely. I'm so sorry that we've not been able to get to absolutely everyone on there, but we're just now coming up to the end of time. Thank you so much, everyone, for asking those questions and asking that to Peggy. Do you want to just close off for us, Peggy, and let us know about some important dates coming up?
Yeah, sure. Let's just put this back up for you so you can see it, if I can find it. This is me showing my great tech champion skills here. There we go. I'm just going to get this slide up so you can see it. This is just the kind of contact details. So if you wanted to get in touch, you can see the website there and our Twitter handle. So thank you to everyone for coming. Hopefully, if you're a beginner, it's given you a really good idea of why and how to set up an email marketing program. And if you're already doing it, hopefully it's given you some top tips to kind of take it to the next level. And this is really just the start, and hopefully you'll be able to learn lots more about email marketing. I'm going to be sending out an email in the next week with some links to a dedicated web page which will have like the webinar recording, the slide deck, and any resources I mentioned. And I will have a look through those questions that came through and try to make sure I answer any that we didn't get to. And if you've got any other kind of tech questions that we didn't get to, you can go to our website, have a look at the Knowledge Hub, sign up to our newsletter, and get in touch with us. I think Nick's putting a link to that in the chat for you.
Yeah,
you'll also get a satisfaction survey. So please fill it out. This is the first webinar I've run for the DCN, so it's useful for me to know what went well and what I could be doing even better for my next one. And then finally, just make sure you tune into other webinars we've got coming up. We've got digital skills for libraries. So if we've got any libraries with us today. We've got Grow Your Digital Skills, which is about digital advertising with Google Arts and Culture, and then data analytics as well with Google Arts and Culture. So make sure you sign up to any of those that you're interested in. So yeah, that's it from me. Thanks again for joining us today.